The first letter showed up on a Monday morning, tucked neatly into my mailbox like a snake waiting in the grass. Bold letters, HOA notice of violation. I almost laughed. Almost. Because you see, it wasn't about noise complaints or overgrown hedges or anything remotely reasonable. No, my crime was far more serious. According to the letter, I was in violation of Section 4.7.2, decorative lawn statues. Apparently, the dozen garden gnomes that had lived peacefully in my front yard for nearly 3 years had become a public menace overnight. Let me back up. My name's Joe. I moved into Maplewood Springs, an HOA-governed neighborhood that prided itself on aesthetic harmony, about 5 years ago. Big trees, wide sidewalks, families on bikes, all that good stuff. I work from home as a graphic designer, and I like things that are a little quirky. So when I bought the place, I started collecting these little gnomes from flea markets, estate sales, even a weird gas station off I-70. Each one had a name and a little backstory. Gary the Grumpy, Linda the Librarian, Tony Two Toes. Yeah, I'm that guy. For 3 years, no one said a word. In fact, some neighbors actually liked them. Mrs. Davenport, the retired teacher next door, used to bring her grandkids over to count them like it was a scavenger hunt. People smiled. They waved. Nobody complained. That is, until Karen became HOA president. Now, I don't mean Karen as a generic internet meme. Her actual name is Karen. Blonde bob, driving a beige SUV, always dressed like she's late to a board meeting at a country club. And she took her new role as president of the HOA like it was a presidential appointment from the actual White House. The day after she took office, she knocked on my door holding a binder thicker than a Sunday Bible and introduced herself with the words, "I believe in order." That should have been my first red flag. 2 weeks later, the first wave of citations hit the neighborhood. Trash cans left out more than 2 hours after pickup. Seasonal wreaths that clashed with approved color palettes. Kids' chalk drawings on sidewalks. People grumbled, but most complied. Then it was my turn. According to her letter, my gnomes were visually disruptive, detrimental to the uniform appearance of the neighborhood, and, get this, potential safety hazards for children who may attempt to play with them. I swear, I almost choked on my coffee. I decided to be civil at first. I wrote a polite email asking for clarification. I even cited the section of the HOA guidelines that technically allowed for up to 3 decorative yard ornaments under 3 feet tall. Mine were small, scattered, and had been around for years without issue. Her reply? A curt, 2-line response. Your gnomes exceed the acceptable number and do not align with the approved style guidelines. Please remove them within 14 days or face escalating fines. Now, I'm not a confrontational guy, but I don't take kindly to being bullied in my own front yard. So I did what any stubborn, slightly petty homeowner would do. I printed her email, framed it, and placed it right next to Gary the Grumpy, who, by the way, had just gotten a new fishing rod. The next day, she sent another notice, this one with a $100 fine. That's when I knew it was war. Now, I'm not rich, but I am creative, and I had time. So over the next week, I went to work. I expanded my collection, tastefully I might add. Gnomes of all sizes, styles, and themes began appearing like mushrooms after a rainstorm. A jazz band of gnomes under a mini gazebo, a gnome rodeo, even a tiny gnome protest with signs that said, "Let us live," and "Gnome justice now." I mowed carefully around them. I added small LED lights so they glowed at night. People started slowing down as they drove by. Some even got out to take photos. One woman said her kid begged to drive past my house on the way to school. Karen? She was furious. She sent more letters. She threatened legal action. She cited bylaws I swear she invented on the spot. But the best part? The more she fought, the more attention the gnomes got. A local news reporter caught wind of the Gnome War of Maplewood and did a segment. A TikTok video someone made of Linda the Librarian hit 100,000 views in 2 days. And then the real magic happened. A city council member reached out. Apparently his daughter loved the gnomes too. He asked if I'd be open to making my yard an official stop on the neighborhood art walk they were planning that summer. And you better believe I said yes. That's when the shift happened. Neighbors who had been silent started speaking up. One even told me privately, "Honestly, it's the only creative thing in this whole neighborhood. It gives the place soul." Even a few HOA board members started pushing back on Karen's crusade. But she wasn't done yet, because what she did next, well, that's where things really escalated. So where were we? Yes, my gnomes were now local celebrities. What started as a passive-aggressive jab at Karen had become something way bigger. My front yard was featured in a community newsletter under the headline, "Whimsy Wins in Maplewood." There were selfies, sketches, even a teenager who dressed up as Gnome Joe for a school project. It was fun. It was harmless. It brought joy, which meant Karen hated every second of it. You see, control wasn't just a goal for her, it was her identity. And now the one thing she couldn't control was becoming the very thing people loved most about our neighborhood. The gnomes were no longer an eyesore, they were a landmark. But Karen wasn't finished. Not even close. 2 weeks before the scheduled art walk, the one where my yard was going to be the opening stop, Karen made her move. She called an emergency HOA board meeting. The agenda? Restoration of community standards and emergency vote on decorative ordinance enforcement. That's HOA speak for get rid of the gnomes. Now, these meetings are usually sparsely attended. Maybe 5 people show up, 7 if there's free cookies. But this time the room was packed. Families, teens, retirees. Even the mayor's assistant was there just to observe. People stood in the back, craning their necks to see. It felt less like an HOA meeting and more like a small-town courtroom drama. All we needed was a gavel and some popcorn. Karen, dressed in what I can only describe as corporate funeral chic, stepped up to the mic and started her speech. "While we all enjoy creativity," she said through a forced smile, "we must protect the uniform appearance and property values of Maplewood Springs. Excessive lawn ornaments pose a danger to children, encourage disorganization, and detract from our neighborhood's elegant charm." Elegant charm? Lady, half the houses on this block still have inflatable Halloween decorations in April. But I digress. She went on, citing section 4.7.2, waving a new printed guideline she drafted that would reduce the allowable number of lawn decorations from 3 to 0. 0. As in no joy allowed. Then she looked right at me. "This is not personal," she said, her voice tight, which of course meant it was entirely personal. Now here's the thing. By this point, I had done my homework. I dug through HOA bylaws, old newsletters, even email chains from previous presidents. Turns out, changes to visual standards required a 2/3 majority vote of the full HOA membership, not just the board. And you better believe I brought that binder with me. So when she motioned for a vote, I raised my hand. "Madam President," I said, matching her smug formality, "before we proceed, I'd like to remind the board that according to Article 3, Section 12 of the HOA bylaws, such a change requires a vote of the full membership, not just the board." She blinked. Hard. Some murmuring in the crowd. A few gasps. One of the board members, shout out to Susan, leaned over to confirm it on her copy. Karen's smile froze on her face like a glitch in a video game. "Well," she stammered, "then we'll put it to a vote at the next general meeting." Spoiler alert, that meeting never happened. Because that night, something amazing happened. As people left the room, a petition started circulating. A petition to recall Karen as HOA president. Apparently, folks were tired of the citations, the micromanagement, the oppressive vibe she brought to a community that was supposed to be friendly and peaceful. My gnomes were just the tipping point, the symbol of everything she tried to erase. Within 4 days, the petition had more than enough signatures. And because Karen had been so thorough with her rule enforcement, it also meant we could use her own process to hold a special election. Oh, the irony. Karen tried to spin it, claiming she was protecting property values and community integrity. But nobody was buying it anymore. Even her loyal sidekick Greg jumped ship and started liking gnome photos on Facebook. The vote was held on a Saturday morning in the community center gym. Karen showed up early, of course, dressed like she was attending a legal deposition and setting up a folding table with flyers that read "Vote for Order, not Chaos." I brought donuts. That morning, more than half the neighborhood showed up to vote. Some brought kids. A few came in gnome hats. One guy wore a shirt that said, "Make whimsy great again. Democracy, my friends, is alive and well in the suburbs." By 4 p.m., the results were in. Karen was removed by a 76% margin. It wasn't even close. As the votes were announced, Karen stood stiffly at the front of the room, clutching her clipboard like it could shield her from public opinion. Then, without a word, she packed up her table, turned on her sensible heels, and walked out of the building. The silence was deafening. And then, applause. Actual applause. The board held a quick emergency vote and appointed Susan as interim president. First order of business? Suspending all fines related to decorative items pending review. Second order? Sending me a formal apology. They even asked if I'd be willing to represent the neighborhood in the next town art fair. I said yes, of course. And I added 3 new gnomes to the collection that week. Karen the clipboard keeper, complete with a mini blazer and angry eyebrows. Greg the sidekick, hiding behind a bush, and Justice Jack, holding a tiny ballot box. To this day, people still stop by to take pictures. There's a hashtag, there's merch, and Karen, last I heard, she sold her house and moved to a gated community 3 towns over. No word on whether they allow gnomes. But me, I'm still here, still working from home, still sipping my morning coffee surrounded by 37 tiny ceramic faces. And every time I look out the window, I smile, because sometimes the best way to fight petty power is with a little garden power joy.